Explained by the Billy Meier contacts, mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
American Hegemony see also American Constitution, First Amendment see also American Government see also NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization see also Ukraine, a Russia war. Contact Report 831.
It can also be said that America, that is to say those responsible, lie and cheat as father and son Bush did during the Iraq War, as other wars and invasions of foreign countries have taken place, because America is unparalleled in its addiction to world domination. And all this is happening because secretly, in the background, America is stirring up and doing everything to ensure that the war will not come to an end until Russia is defeated and lies devastated, so that America can satisfy its desire for world domination in such a manner that Russia, too, will dance under their lust for domination. And it was the immigrants and their illegal seizure of the land through murder and manslaughter, whereby the Spaniards practically acted as beginners when they indiscriminately massacred and murdered indigenous peoples in South America for the sake of gold, as later also the other Europeans, such as the Germans, English, French, Scots, Irish, the Swiss, Italians, and Austrians, etc., raged in the new America. But this is still not really explained to the world public today. On the contrary, America is exalted, which, addicted to world domination, had already started World War I in 1756 and led it until 1763. It also followed that the Americans, addicted to world domination, not only dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and thus murdered an enormous number of human beings completely innocent of the war and caused devastation, but also caused long-term nuclear radiation, which over the years claimed hundreds of thousands of victims. America has always interfered unjustifiably in the foreign affairs of countries, and continues to do so in order to control and dominate the world. As a result of its addiction to hegemony, 1 to 3 of all countries in the world are already equipped with American military stations. And the majority of the people allow this to happen and do not understand that America, since it was founded some 250 years ago, and in a murderous and effectively very human blood-shedding manner. Just think of the Civil War of America and the slavery debacle, etc., as well as the still high existing racial hatred, which is publicly practiced by the Ku Klux Klan, without the government doing anything against it, as well as not against the allegedly religious and very questionable Scientology, then one already knows a lot about America. Besides, think of Vietnam, Korea, and Afghanistan, as well as the following military operations by America. Note. Source: Wikipedia. Timeline of U.S. military operations. English language variation.
Contact Report 832.
But if we take a closer look at everything, it is shocking to see that there are unmistakable parallels between Germany and America in terms of hegemony, that is to say, the desire for world domination, namely decisions and actions that are Nazi-like. However, it is important to note that the peoples of Germany and America must not and never be lumped together, because, as you have calculated, only about 27% of the peoples of Germany and America are righteous and good people who are against violence, war, and other forms of murder and manslaughter. However, the other and unfortunately larger part of these peoples, as your clarifications regarding the Swiss population and all countries of the earth have shown, are susceptible to violence and war, and thus supporters of the death penalty, murder and manslaughter, torture and massacres, etc. This is just as it was in the 3 world wars that have taken place so far, but as it is also in this 4th and very strange world war instigated by America, which the Western states are leading by interfering partisanly in the war in Ukraine and supplying weapons and battle tanks to the war-mad Zelensky. So everything is in no wise a good thing if and when weapons and battle tanks are delivered to Ukraine, that is to say, to the war fanatic and warmongering Zelensky, which primarily helps America with its NATO, so that their delusion of world domination is fulfilled. It is no better with those fools who partisanly seize the banner of Zelensky, Ukraine and thus America, and its NATO, and help to make a pig of Russia in the opposite direction in order to realize America's delusion of world domination, which it has cherished for some 250 years and has already achieved 113. The countries of the West, that is to say many of their rulers, as well as large parts of the population, including Switzerland, are biased towards Zelensky and Ukraine, because they are so lowly intelligent that they neither see nor recognize that behind everything lies America and its constant hegemonism and its NATO, which together want to humiliate, cash in, and dominate Russia. This war maniac, who is without any doubt underhandedly in the service of America and its NATO, allows murder and destruction without knowing that he is a welcome stooge of America, who will be dropped by it as soon as he is no longer needed. This is what America and its secret services are known for, acting according to the motto, when the bog has done its duty, it has become worthless and is simply disposed of, just as those human beings are simply disposed of, or imprisoned for life who expose crimes committed, or secrets kept by America and its military, such as Julian Assange, who exposed war crimes committed by Americans and is therefore to be punished by the USA with life imprisonment, if not executed. So the war in Ukraine has been going on for a year now, only because the Western countries respond. Their idiots in the form of irresponsible rulers and partisans are complying to support Ukraine in the war with Russia, only to raze it to the ground according to America's will for hegemony and to be able to dominate it afterwards.
Contact Report 833.
But especially nothing will change with all the stupid responsible leaders of the Western states, who are now willing to deliver battle tanks and weapons, as well as ammunition to the dictator, which Zelensky really is, and which the leaders of the Western states have not yet recognized in the dictatorially mismanaged Ukrainian state. All these irresponsible people are, of course, led by America, which sees a great opportunity in terms of its long-held delusion of world domination to be able to force Russia down through this, although America claims to the contrary that this is not the case.
But, as in the last World War, the pro-war sections of the fallible governments and populations are prepared to supply tanks and weapons of all kinds, totally irresponsibly, to the warmongering Zelensky to keep the war going endlessly. The fact that these supporters are also supporting the Americans lurking in the background after world domination and are infatuated with their will, who are basically to blame for everything that is happening in the war, that this war is being fought in the first place, is unfortunately something that these stupid and obviously stupidity-addicted and America-gunning people cannot realize. And this despite the fact that it is well known that America has already nested in about 1/3 of all countries in the world and determines their weal and woe underground, also in Germany. The Ukraine-Russia War, which effectively would have been extinguished and ended in 16 days had it not been for the sick idiots who partisanly took the banner for Zelensky. The whole American plan for hegemony would have failed, and so the long-cherished Americans striving for world domination could and can now be implemented. Even today, the dumb, stupid, and idiotic have not yet realized that America already has at least 1/3 of the world in its clutches. This is also the case in Europe, where America's military is based in Germany, and whose actions are largely determined by the Americans, also politically. The dictators of the European dictatorship are also largely dependent on them, but this is not noticed by the stupid and idiotic people who wield the scepter of the governments, for they really are as dumb as beans, and what is more, they are America's servants without realizing it. Therefore, they can also not see what they are doing by partisanly supplying arms to the war-mad Zelensky, according to his begging, and thus tracking the Americans' will for world domination.
Contact Report 834.
I wanted to mention something about America, because in regard to this state, I have noticed various things that have many similarities with the Nazi Empire and the atrocities that took place. However, this has been the case since ancient times, before the state of America was founded. Since that time, America in particular has shown itself to be very criminal in its hegemonic behavior with its associated acts of war in really extremely conscienceless forms of war crime, inhumanity, and contempt for human life around the earth. In this regard, I have visited various places in the past and have seen how the American Army committed tremendous war crimes and the military was never held accountable for them. The state of America always and in every case took the liberty of covering up the atrocities of its army or simply denying the facts and presenting them as lies. Furthermore, it is common practice in America that persons who openly name and disclose crimes committed by the American Army, etc., are persecuted and murdered. And on the other hand, such persons are also tortured and subsequently imprisoned for life. The best example in this respect are various secret penal camps and torture prisons around the world, such as Guantanamo, whose existence has become world famous. The atrocities, acts of war, and the many interferences of America in the affairs of foreign states are committed all over the world. And since President Truman created NATO, it has also been involved, of course, in the background and directed by America. But what America's leaders allow themselves to do, including that part of the population, all American citizens, who are righteous human beings, are of course not addressed and not included, who are unrighteous, racist, and of the same mind as the leaders, is to murder and destroy. They or their ancestors were also responsible for what happened criminally in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, as well as for the massacre in 1968 in My Lai and in many other places in the world, where the Americans in their world domination addiction carried out many kinds of inhumanities and war crimes, assassinations, and all kinds of other crimes.
Contact Report 838.
But America is also to be mentioned with regard to war addiction and world domination mania.
Behind the scenes, America not only commands NATO, which Svath and I recognized as a sanctioned multi-state murderous organization, but I also know that America, together with NATO, engages in global tyranny and maintains partisan groups, just as it not only wants global supremacy, but as an aid to the total world domination it has been striving for since time immemorial. Something that has still not been grasped by the majority of the world, and that does everything for America to always be able to swim on top with its lies and deceptions, whereby its own people are lied to and deceived, and many do not know what is actually being played politically. Furthermore, and I also want to say this, America sank many ships and submarines of other countries in the oceans during the war, as well as its own, all of which are ecological time bombs. Because their fuel tanks are full of very large amounts of fuel oil, etc., the tanks slowly rust through and release the fuel into the waters, which will not only contaminate the waters of the oceans and poison millions of marine life and also human beings, but will also kill them. But nobody wants to hear this, and nobody wants to know. Just as nobody wants to know that America has lost nuclear bombs in some places, which can go off with time, that is to say will go off sooner or later, which those responsible know well, but keep silent about it. And that America is doing true evil worldwide in the cloak of alleged help, but that is not recognized by the pro-America people, just as it is not recognized by the various governments that lift America high into the heavens and dance to its tune.
Contact Report 840.
But everything is done to conceal the truth and to lift the biggest criminal state on earth, America, up into the sky. And this, on the one hand, because it has already incorporated many states in its hegemonic mania, and on the other hand, because America's revenge with its NATO murder organization is feared, of which Ptah once said, as by the way did Quetzal and some others, that America is a second Nazi empire.
We do indeed judge it in that process, for the drive for hegemony, according to our observations and findings, has been driven with evil since ancient times. We have witnessed all the horrors of slavery, such as also how tens of thousands of human beings were robbed in Africa and traded and sold as slaves in America. Murdered in their thousands, beaten to death, shot, drowned, and dragged to death, strangled and massacred, and so on. We have followed how the indigenous people were persecuted, wars were waged against them, and they were tortured and murdered. And no state on earth, according to our findings, has waged so many wars and interfered militarily in foreign states' affairs with dastardly murder and war, secret service murder and crime, as well as with racial hatred, in such a way and somehow blindly as America. And the way America, with its military and so-called security forces and secret services, and in terms of all the intrigues and so forth, has been dedicated to its delusions of hegemony throughout the world since time immemorial, surpasses anything we know of in terms of evil.
Contact Report 842.
As we have followed the events on Earth since ancient times, and as our records prove, America was founded in its very beginnings by murder, when a certain George Washington shot a peacenik without hearing him when he came with a white flag to negotiate peace. That is on our records, as are all the war crimes since then that America, with its military, later emerging and murdering secret services, mercenaries and race hate organizations, etc., has carried out and still continues to carry out on the vastness of the whole earth within this framework of its delusion of world domination.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but I do want to say that there is still a distinction to be made, because not all Americans have the same attitude as those who strive for world domination. That only applies to a part of the American people, because another part is good, and that part consists of human beings of righteousness, and does not at all agree with what is being striven for hegemonistically and secretly, and without the knowledge of the people by the bulk of the rulers, the religionists, and, in fact, the sectarians, the madmen of the army and the secret services, etc. Especially the religionists and their sectarians are to be mentioned. In America, namely by a pastor, the national motto, "In God We Trust," was stamped on the 2-cent U.S. coins in 1864, when Congress enacted the Coinage Act. Since 1956, the sectarian slogan has also been emblazoned on the dollar notes, which in and of itself sufficiently demonstrates the religious mania of the majority of Americans, and also testifies to what is fundamentally responsible for what America is doing, namely a worldwide sectarian-induced murder and destruction by the military, the secret services and other cliques of murderers conditioned in the faith of Christ, with the bullshit slogan on the notes for this purpose. But the fact that this is counteracted, because torture, murder, and racial hatred in all imaginable evil forms have been practiced by the U.S. military and secret services, etc., since time immemorial, is not taken into consideration at all and is excused in the name of state security. The commandment listed in the Luther Bible, Genesis 2, chapter 20, verse 13, "Thou shalt not kill," is not considered or followed by America in any process. Obviously, this only applies to the entire Christian world outside the USA, but obviously not to America itself, because it obviously has a special divine regulation to be allowed to murder and destroy worldwide through wars, secret services and capital punishment, etc., as well as to interfere murderously and destructively in the affairs of foreign states. But now back to the religious and secular delusion regarding hegemony, and thus the delusion of world conquest, which primarily results from the religious delusion of faith, which fundamentally plays the main role in everything that happens in America's actions, activities, and governance, as well as in daily life. Especially in politics, the military, the secret services, which of course includes the whole sectarian system. It has to be said that all this is unique on Earth. In fact, there is nothing like it elsewhere in any other country on Earth. For example, apart from the mainstream Protestant and Catholic churches, there are countless other sects, some of which I will mention, to name just a few of the countless different God-diluting sects. There are, for example, the Catholic Apostolic, the Seventh-day Adventists, as well as the Adventist sub-congregations, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Theocratic Organization, In the Shadow of the Watchtower, Free Bible Students Congregations, Church of the Kingdom of God, Les Amis de l'Homme, Scientology, Youth Christian Fellowship, Worldwide Church of God, Branham Movement, Keller Fellowship, Philadelphia Movement, Temple Society, Original Christian Fellowship, Emma Berger Fellowship, Christian Science, Unity School of Christianity, and Mazdaznan Movement. The bulk of all the sects form the bulk of America's delusionists, who slavishly rule everything, and financially exploit and suck the delusionists to the bone, as well as commit countless murders, not only through wars America wages worldwide under the motto, "In God We Trust," murdering as well as destroying land after land for its old-fashioned hegemony delusion.
Contact Report 843.
Also, drones and bombers for murder and destruction, for example, have not been controlled in war zones for years, but in America, and it doesn't matter whether they are used to murder and destroy in Afghanistan or Ukraine, for example. In this way, America participates in all the murder and destruction, but it is not directly present on the spot with its military, because insidiously everything is controlled remotely in America. In this way, America can always claim that it is not involved in the war, etc., because it is not directly present.
Contact Report 844.
However, the fact that since the end of the war, America has still been squatting in Germany as the main occupation, conducting it politically and using it underhandedly today in order to use the clown and warmonger Zelensky in Ukraine as a straw man for the war against Russia, so as not to have to step directly into the limelight and admit that behind everything there is only the America hegemony known from time immemorial, is not recognized by the stupid rulers of Germany nor by the EU dictatorship powers. The mere fact that the neo-Nazis in Germany are supplying weapons to Zelensky, not to Ukraine, but really to the warmongering Zelensky, only brings treacherous America closer to its delusion of hegemony. This with the additional help of all those states that supply weapons to Zelensky, and thus effectively and truly wage war against Russia. The claim that this is not the case is nothing more than an infamous lie and deception, because the West is effectively waging war against Russia, insidiously steered by America, which in its hegemony mania has known no limits since time immemorial, and is supported by the majority of Americans. The minority, however, which is against all the delusions of world domination, the wars and everything violent, unjust, inhumane, and evil that America organizes in its own country and in the whole world, has no chance whatsoever to break through in order to shape everything for the better and humane. On the contrary, they will be harassed and punished if they even say something that does not suit those who always refer to national security and above all to God, and believe that America has the sole right to be able to direct the world. Not only politically, but also with the military and its wars, etc., with the murderous secret services, as well as with the sects and the delusion of God, for which they walk over not only millions, but effectively over many billions of corpses worldwide.
Contact Report 848.
It was once the case, and is also the case today, that America wants to take the helm over the whole world. The proverbial hegemony mania of the American government and the dark government will probably not be broken until it really cracks, which will inevitably happen one day. The mere fact that about 500 million firearms are privately owned, as Ptah said recently, will one day lead to their being wickedly used against the government's edicts. But it will be that a catastrophe will have to happen before halfway sanity will arise.
Contact Report 851.
Then the USA military entered the First World War, 1914 to 1918 in reality. However, the First World War had already taken place from 1756 to 1763, caused by America, which of course has always been denied, but which is deliberately and falsely simply called the 7 Years' War, and thus the truth is concealed, in which all the major European powers fought for balance of power and territorial gains. The fact that the truth is concealed is the usual thing, in which they actually had no business being involved and which obviously happened for purely hegemonic reasons. Then Congress passed a new sedition law that banned offensive statements, namely profane, scurrilous, or disloyal speeches, or simply remarks towards the military or the U.S. government. This law, which was used with incredible vehemence and lies to imprison, for example, Eugene Debs, who was running for president for the Socialist Party. He was put in prison from where he then championed his candidacy. The U.S. then, through the U.S. military intervention, actually war supporters of WW2, accused opponents who did not participate in WW2 as a so-called fifth column, working for the government of Germany. Then later, in the Vietnam War, as in the Iraq War, as in America's military interventions in other states where the U.S. intervened, opponents were monitored and harassed by the U.S. government. If critics of U.S. foreign policy appeared and continue to appear, then they were considered to be criminal critics of the U.S. government. This because they were targeted as a result of their opposition to the government's rotten policies. America as a state is today pursuing its own agenda in addition to that of its people, and it is doing so ruthlessly against the effective reality of any desire for peace and the other desires of the American people. The American state, that is to say the American government, is working to infiltrate, harass, and eliminate all those of the population and all states of the world who oppose its agenda of terror and violence. That the effective government and the shadow government of the USA are using tactics ranging from worldwide persecution to assassination of those, whether American-born or other nationals, who expose the truth of the U.S. government, the crimes of the military and the legislation and governance and its delusions of hegemony, etc. That is a fact. Human beings should be very vigilant and ensure that they do not act against the limits set by the official government and the shadow government of the USA through constitutional articles, otherwise not only mischief but much worse will flourish. The lying assertion that the government and shadow government of the USA is pursuing and exercising a policy of peace and free trade, etc. abroad is an unparalleled lie, because it is not the promotion of peace and freedom that is being pursued, as this is not happening in their own country either, but the delusion of hegemony, as a result of which America has already spread and taken up residence in almost 1/4 of all the states of this earth, and is directing what has to be according to American systems.
Contact Report 852.
But here I have another article regarding that a journalist dares to say a frank word about what the rulers of America really are, how they abuse their might, lie and deceive the people, manage dirty schemes that could not be meaner to indulge in the delusion of world domination, and win it with war, murder, manslaughter, and destruction.
Contact Report 860.
This is unfortunately the case, and it is usually because the leaders of many countries and their supporters from the nations, in their stupidity, do not realize that America's leaders and shadow leaders, as well as the part of the population that supports everything, are riddled with criminal machinations. However, if America is closely examined and judged in terms of its leaders and their supporters from the people, then it can be seen without a doubt that America is a state of degenerated extremes, of injustice, of hegemony, and of all crime. And this is beginning in the leadership of the state itself, as well as in that section of the people who are infested with the like of governance and shadow governance. Equally, this is true of NATO, which is truly helpless without America's leadership and is led by America's powerful.
Contact Report 861.
This attempt to gain the upper hand has already become noticeable since the World War of 1914, to 1918. But all those responsible in all countries of the world, as well as all peoples, have closed their eyes and senses against it, so that the pro-America sentiment spread worldwide and only a small minority became aware of it. Thus, America was able to secretly, surreptitiously, hypocritically, and meanly begin to implement its hegemony mania, so that in reality today, more than 1/3 of the world is already under American influence. And the fact that the clever rulers of the countries and the America-friendly majority of their peoples have not thought about what is to come will in time, if everything continues like this, have consequences that no one imagines.